Can we start now? See my screen? Okay. So today we proceed with practical 6. So have you learned about inheritance and polymorphism? So I will give you a very short introduction regarding the inheritance part. Okay, so for the inheritance, so let's say you have three classes, right? For example, you have class circle, rectangle, and triangle. So these three classes have the same data field, and it also have the same methods. So instead of creating the same field and creating the same methods, you can use inheritance. Okay, so somehow inheritance will let you to avoid redundancies in each classes. Okay, so for example here, so this is your class. So from here you can see that circle has method get area, rectangle also get area method, and then triangle class also have get area method. So instead of creating these three methods separately, you can use inheritance. Somehow this inheritance will avoid redundancies lah. Okay, so inheritance we support the word superclass and subclass. Wait a minute, yeah. Okay, inheritance we have superclass and subclass. For example, bank account is your superclass, while saving and checking is your subclass, in which subclass here will inherit properties and methods from the superclass. For example, okay, so geometric object is your superclass, and then circle and rectangle is your subclass. Circle and rectangle is your subclass, right? So these two subclass will inherit methods and properties from superclass. Okay. So in order to write your subclass, we use the keyword extends. So circle is your subclass, right? So in order to inherit the properties from your superclass, your subclass will use extends. And then this one is the name of your superclass lah. Class circle, extend, geometric object. Okay, so this one is your code. The first one is your superclass, which is the geometric object class. And then this circle and rectangle is your subclass, because we have the keyword extends, right? This one also has the keyword extend. So rectangle and circle is your subclass. Okay, so in order to inherit the properties of superclass, we use the word extend like this. Extend geometric object. Extend geometric object. Okay, and then this one is your driver program lah. For your UML diagram, the arrow is like this. So this arrow represent inheritance, superclass, and then subclass. Okay, so for your practical 6, which is inheritance and polymorphism, you have about 3 questions only. Okay, so for question number 1, it is about a bank. So for this case, a bank has these 2 types of account. So the first one is saving account, and then the second one is current account, in which your saving account earns interest that compounds monthly. For example, the interest is calculated based on the balance on the last day of the month. And then for the current account, it has no interest, but the customer will be given a small number of free transactions monthly. And if the transaction exceeds the free transaction given, the customer will be charged a nominal fees for every single additional transaction. So based on these 2 account types, you need to create a superclass account, in which your superclass account has the properties of account number, balance, date created, and also the method for deposit and withdrawal. After that, you need to create 2 subclasses for saving and current accounts. Okay, so for the saving account, you need to add a method to calculate the interest amount and to add the interest to the balance. Okay, so how you're going to create a superclass account? You can follow the normal way on how you're going to create your class. And then your superclass account must have this data field, account number, balance, date created, and also methods for deposit and withdrawal. And then for the 2 subclass, for saving and current account, you can have account and more is current account. So this is your subclass. So you can use the word extends. Extend and then superclass name. Okay. And then for the subclass saving, you need to have method to calculate interest amount and to add interest to the balance. And for B, you need to write a driver program in which your driver program will create objects for saving account and current account. After that, you need to test the deposit and withdraw methods in each class to ensure that these 2 objects will work correctly lah. So for the saving account, you also need to include a statement to test the method for calculating the interest amount and adding the interest to the balance. So for this one, no need the input from user lah. You can initialize the values for deposit and withdraw in your code. And then for C, you need to write a client program that has a simple menu for handling transaction for a current account. And then your program should ensure that the transaction fee is deducted from the account balance if the number of free transactions has been exceeded for the month. For question 1C, your output should be something like this. Okay, so this is your menu. Let's say I have 4 menus in my bank ATM: withdrawal, deposit, check balance, and quick. So let's say I enter 1. So it will show you the current balance. For example, 10,000. So this one, you need to set this value in your file. You can simply set this value. For example, I want to draw about 200. So your system will update the balance. Then after that, it will look again and display the menu again. For example, I want to deposit money. Press 2. I enter about 300,000 lah. Okay. So your system will show the updated balance, which is 12,800. And then it will look again. Let's say I enter menu number 3. It will show you the current balance. And then it will look again and ask the user whether if he wants to continue the process or not. So let's say I press 4. So process complete. Okay, so for your question number 1C, you need to create this kind of menu lah. Okay, you may try to answer question number 1 first. For question number 2 and 3, we continue next week. So try to create the superclass account and subclass saving account and current account. And also question B and C, 1B and C. constructor. Constructor. No argument class constructor. Okay, so this is how you get the current date. And then parameterized constructor. And then your setters and getters. So in your Superclass account, you have 3 data members, right? Which is account number, balance, and date created, right? So you need to have 3 getters and 3 setters. Okay. And then methods for deposit and withdrawal. Okay. So this is the superclass account lah for question number 1. So basically, how you are going to create your superclass account? You can create your superclass account just like you create your normal class. And then in your superclass, you need to have your private data members, no arguments constructor, parameters constructor, setters and getters, and also methods. So this one depends on the question lah. Okay. So because in this file we are using a variable called that created, and then the type of this variable is date, so we need to import date. Okay. So this is how we are going to get the date. Okay. So next we need to create a subclass. So the requirement is about this one. So the saving account earns interest that compounds monthly, which is the interest actually is calculated based on the balance on the last day of the month. Okay. So in your subclass savings account, you need to have two methods. The first one is to calculate the interest amount, and then the second one is to add the interest to the balance. So how you're going to create your subclass? So just follow the superclass method. So first you need to have no arguments constructor, parameters constructor, setter and getter methods, and also methods required by the question. So this one is no arguments constructor, and then the second one is parameters constructor. Parameters constructor public saving. Okay, so in your parameters constructor, you need to have arguments, right? So these arguments comes from your superclass account. This one. Okay. This one. Okay, meaning that you are inherit the properties in your superclass. You don't have to initialize the account number and balance again in your subclass. You can simply inherit the properties from your superclass like this. Okay. So in order to use the properties, in order to use the data members in your superclass, you need to use the keyword super. And inside here, inside your parenthesis here is the data members that you want to retrieve the values lah. So this is the keyword super. Okay. So next we need to have what? Setters and getters. So you can create your setters here. Okay, so inside your subclass, so here we only have one data field, right? We only have one data members. So you need only one getters and one setters. So basically we set the access modifier as public for setters and getters. For the data member, we set it as private. But for the method, for the setters and getters, we set it as public. Get interest. So this is the setters and getters lah for your data member. And then next, methods required by the question. But methods to calculate interest. And then another method is method to add the interest to the balance. Okay, so this is the subclass for your saving account lah. The saving account is your subclass. So in order to inherit the properties of the superclass, we use the word extends. So extend account. So account here is your superclass. Okay, this one. Okay, because of the question is the interest is calculated based on the last day, right? So in this subclass account, you only have one data member only, which is the interest rate. So for your interest rate, you can set with any values. For example, you can also set as maybe about 2.5% lah. It depends on you. Okay. So basically for the interest rate, we set the value as static member. And then this one is your no arguments constructor. And then you also need to have your parameterized constructor. So inside here is your arguments. So in order to take this parameter, you can simply call this parameter by using super keyword. So this account and balance comes from your superclass account. Okay, you can simply use the data members from your account, your superclass account, without initialize the variables again. You can simply use this one. And then you also need to have setters and getters in your subclass. So this is the getters and then this is the setters. Okay. And then next, you can have your methods. So this one is depends on the question lah. So for the saving account, it requires you to write a method to calculate the interest amount and also a method to add the interest to the balance. So this one is a method to calculate the interest amount yearly. And then this one is the method to calculate to add the interest to the balance. Okay, and then for the subclass current account, This is the question. Okay, so the current account has no interest, but the customer is given a small number of free transactions monthly and is charged a nominal transaction fee for additional transaction. Okay, so the data members for your sub class current account, we have free number of free transaction and also nominal transaction fee. Okay, so for the subclass current account, we have free transaction fee, and also transaction count. So we create another variable called transaction count because we want to populate the transaction for every transaction lah. We need to add transaction by transaction. That's why we need to we need to create another variable called transaction count. And then you can have your elements constructor. And then for the parameters constructor, public current account. Okay, so this one is your parameters constructor. Inside here is your arguments. So this arguments comes from your superclass account. This one. Okay, so in order to invoke these two data members, which is account and balance, you need to use the keyword super. And then this one is the variable name or your data members lah. Okay, so inside your parameters constructor also you need to initialize the values of transaction count to 0 because we want to count the transaction one by one, right? And then we want to add the transaction one by one so that later on we can identify whether the transaction exceeds 2 or not. If it exceeds 2, the customer will be charged 2 ringgit. So that's why we need, before we use this variable, before we use this data members, we need to set the values as 0. So somehow 0 is the default value for in any initialization. And then you can have your setters and getters. So this one, in your current account, in your subclass current account, you have 3 data members or 3 properties, right? So you need to have 3 getters and 3 setters. So it is a good practice if you can provide the setters and getters for each data members. So setters you can create by your own. Okay, so this is the getters for your database lah, because in your subclass create account, current account, you have 3 data members, right? So we need to create 3 getters lah. And then the last one is method required by the question. So the question asks you to, what is the question? Or in order to increment. This one, you need to create a method to identify lah whether the transaction exceeds monthly allowed transaction or not. Okay, so this method is for you to increment the transaction one by one. So if the, for example, I set the free transaction as 2, right? So if the free transaction, if the transaction exceeds 2, for example, 3, 4, and so on, so the customer will be charged 2 ringgit. So this one also you can modify accordingly lah. Let's say you want to charge the user maybe about around 10 ringgit. You can change this one. Or if you want to limit the transaction to 5, you can make some changes here lah. So your task is 1B and 1C. So please create a driver programs for your account, saving and current. Meaning that you may only have one test program only lah. And then for C, you need to write a client program. Okay, you may start answering 1B and 1C now.